first question, I mean, bald, middle-aged guys with glasses.
Yeah.
Do you think we were separated at birth?
Possibly. Possibly. I don't know. I think you're the tougher one. You got most of it. Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
I got the weight. They got the intelligence and the brawn, I guess.
I wear baggy clothes. I like to hide it. Hey man, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So you and I were just talking off camera just a second ago. I know you said you've told this story 1,000 times. Yes. I've known you for a year or two, and I'd never heard the behind the scenes story, and I think it's fascinating. I think you just said we were having like a cheesesteak in Citizens Bank Park, and you said, hey, this is what, and I was like, no way. I was like, man, we got to get you on the Shots from the Winchester podcast to tell that story.
Yeah.
So let me set the stage if I can.
Yes, please.
You'd wanted to be an Army officer since you were a teenager. You worked hard. You found your way into West Point, right?
Yep.
Which is by itself a feat, and everybody who knows that just getting to West Point and getting the nomination from your congressman or your senator and applying and being competitive, right? Super competitive. You work your butt off for 4 years to get there. And this is where, and I know there's a lot more to the story behind that even then, but what was really fascinating was just what happened from there.
Yeah, so, like you said, I mean, I did my 4 years. There were times where I was actually pretty, in the beginning of plebe year, I don't think there's anybody who's going to play through West Point who said they didn't think about quitting plebe year at least. Sure. It's just they test you like that on purpose. So going through that and then to say, okay, I can make it, and I go through this, and there's a lot of things that happened during the 4 years that, kind of tested my resolve. But ultimately I get to, so June 1st, 2002, get my diploma from George Bush. Big happy day, my mom's birthday.
From the man himself?
Yeah, from the president himself. He's there. He's there. He says, hey, congratulations, cadet, and your safety, we salute him and all that stuff. And then probably I would say maybe about 15 minutes from getting my oath of commission, or not, sorry, about an hour maybe after I did my last out processing.
You've just graduated college.
Just graduated.
You've just become ominous dominus. You are now an officer in the United States Army.
First time wearing my Class A's, I just did an oath. About maybe 15 minutes from seeing the Thayer gate in my rearview mirror, my SUV flips off the side of the road, goes into the woods. I'm like hanging upside down from my seatbelt in the woods. Luckily, an off-duty EMT saw my car, and a couple of my fellow cadets saw my car on the side of the road. They pushed it over. They said, I guess, from what I've been told, I fell unconscious right there and then they airlifted me to Westchester Hospital, and I was in a coma for 5 days.
So let me just go back for a second. So you've been an officer in the Army for 15 minutes now.
Yeah.
Put in 4 years of work just at West Point, plus all the time before that. You've been an Army officer 15 minutes, and so what they think happened is you just fell unconscious somehow driving, and now you have no memory of this.
Well, not while I was driving. They say I fell unconscious once I was, once the accident happened. Because basically what happened was my car was packed up. I live in Jersey, and I was going to drive home from Jersey. I told my family, I said, go ahead without me. I had last minute out processing. So I said, go ahead without me. They had a party waiting for me. They had a cake and everything set up for me. They were at home. My mom gets a call from my TAC officer saying, hey, listen, you need to come back. He's been in a car accident. He's in Westchester Hospital right now. He's in ICU. So they drive all the way back to West Point. So what happened was they don't know exactly what caused the accident. I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99.99% sure it wasn't me falling asleep or anything like that, because, I just got through West Point.
High.
I'm about to go home, see my family, about to party, live good, eat shrimp, like doing the whole thing, And then my car flips off the side of the road. I think maybe I did a sharp turn out of the way of another driver or something like that, and I had my SUV packed up in the back. Okay. So maybe they're off balance and things like that. So my stuff was all over the road. They had to shut down that part, gather my stuff, send it back up to West Point, airlift me to Westchester Hospital. And I said I was in a coma pretty much for about 4.5 days, 5 days. And and they say I was almost like a celebrity. They say the superintendent and the high-ranking generals came to go see me and everything like that. My whole family, everybody came to see me, but I don't remember any of it because I was night time. So once I did my 5.5 days, and they said, okay, I woke up out of the coma, and they said, okay, but for about 2 weeks, they said, okay, well, they checked my vitals. They said, okay, you're stable enough, you're gonna be alive. They said, okay, you're Army property now. So then they sent me so they scooped me up and went to Westchester Hospital. To Walter Reed. They shipped me down to Walter Reed. I was there for about a week and a half, do initial, rehab, had to learn how to walk again, all that stuff like that. They said, okay, you're really kind of jacked up. and we have soldiers coming from theater coming.
Do you remember this? Do you remember this
No,
part?
my first memory I have is probably, I think, and it's like an image. It's not like a continuous memory like you have. It's just like flashes. Like I remember being in the bed, and I remember seeing like people from different parts of my life being together, like my ex-girlfriend, one of my friends, and then one of my best friends who was stationed out of Fort Myers. He came to see me. They were all kind of together. And what the funny thing about that is, it feels like it was a dream. I think when I was going through it, I thought I was dreaming, like a really vivid dream, because these people don't blend together. These are people from different parts of my life. Like they don't even know each other, they're together. But it's just like a flash, like just one image I see, and that was me at Walter Reed. My first memory at all after the accident is at Walter Reed. And then one time I have another flash where I think my family is all together and we're eating in the cafeteria.
Okay.
But other than that, it's like, it's not continuous.
But you're awake out of the coma now.
I'm awake.
And you said, and you jumped right to it. And I think it's fascinating, almost how you like, this was just a process. And but you said I had to learn to walk again.
Yeah.
Like, is that, I've never been through physical therapy like that. Is that, are we talking months?
No, the reason I learned how to walk again because my balance was so off. So they would say I would get up, and after about 2 steps, I would just fall on myself.
So you're awake and conscious. You just don't remember any of this.
Yeah, I don't remember anything. I do remember the not having the good balance. I remember having being in a wheelchair for a little bit at Walter Reed, the tail end of Walter Reed. I remember that. The more intense rehab I had to do, in the pools and stuff like that was at Westchester Hospital. So after Walter Reed for a week and a half, they sent me down to Westchester Hospital to McGuire Hospital down in Richmond, Virginia for 6 weeks. That's when I did the more intense rehab. That's where my memory starts to really kind of get more continuous. And that's when I had to walk in the pool and have floats on and stuff like that to get my balance. And then once I got a little better with that, I graduated to a walker, and then I graduated to a cane. And then they had me walking on the treadmills and things like that, so I have support, stuff like that.
What were you actually diagnosed with?
Well, okay, so my injury was, you see a scar here on my head. This cut goes to my brain. So I had a laceration on my brain here. I had a laceration on my brain here. I had a contusion on my brain, on my lungs here from the seat from the steering wheel, because my airbag didn't come out. And I had nerve damage on my arm and had a cut on my hand. So for a while there, I couldn't extend my arm without it hurting, like it was my nerves were kind of messed up. So they say that part of my brain obviously was cut here, so that damaged a part of my brain. So the memory was messed up. They said they would do tests. They would say, okay, remember these 3 things, something like these 3 random things, and then they would ask me a couple questions, and then 30 seconds later they say, well, what were 3 things that I told you to remember? And I wouldn't remember them at all. Or they would say, where'd you graduate from? I didn't know. I graduated from West Point. I didn't know what the day it was, who's the president, things like that. I didn't remember. Originally, they say in Westchester that I didn't remember who my uncle was. They say I was hallucinating. That they said my dad came to see me. My dad passed away in 2001 while still a cadet. They said that I was kind of paranoid. They said that I thought one of the nurses was a terrorist. So
makes it hard to get treatment, I suppose.
Exactly. Just a lot of different things. They say one day I just started speaking Spanish, and my family speaks Spanish. But I learned Spanish at West Point, and they said I was just speaking Spanish, and they're like, I don't understand. It's just goofy things like that. So it's
kind of fascinating. It's fascinating to look at what the brain retains, and we don't even know it, right?
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's when you see these movies, these TV shows, the person comes out of a coma, they're like, oh, almost like a deep sleep, and they're fine. It's no, it's a long process. So to go back to your original question, though, as far as walking is concerned, it was a process. I had to graduate again from wheelchair to walker to cane to being able to walk by myself. So
what kind of time frame are we talking about?
I was at McGuire in Richmond for about 6 weeks. That was after doing a week and a half at Walter Reed, and that was after doing 2 weeks at Westchester. Okay. So my whole summer, pretty much. I think I graduated June 1st, 2002. I got out of the hospital, I think, in sometime in August, August 5th, I think it was. So about 2 months I was in the hospital.
So now you get out of the hospital, and obviously you suffered a pretty traumatic, not only just injury, but it sounds like a TBI.
Yep.
And I mean, and And then, so at this point, are you thinking, all right, now, like, put me in, boys. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to go.
That's exactly it. It's like, okay, I did that. I'm alive. I'm good.
Yeah.
Again, put me in, coach. I'm ready to play, kind of thing. And that was where the other part of this whole thing, the whole incident was, because it's you're at home and you're like, what do I do next?
You go back to New Jersey.
Go back to New Jersey home. Okay. Yep, living with my mom. And so it seems like the rest of the world moves on without you, because my family and my friends and everybody was like, okay, you're good. I got to go back to work. I go back to do my thing. They're living their life.
Sure.
I'm back at home with nowhere to go, nothing to do, and I'm getting paid as a lieutenant. I'm still a second lieutenant. I'm still, but I have nowhere to go. I have nobody really looking for me. So days kind of blend together.
Does the Army not know what to do with you at this point? Or are they just letting you rehab, like just trying to figure out what do we do?
That's tough, because I think, again, I didn't go to OBC. I had nobody really advocating for me. I had nobody saying, hey, John, we need John, come back. Yeah. I just literally got pinned on. So I didn't really belong to a unit yet. I belonged to Walter Reed by default, but Walter Reed had soldiers all over the place, Yeah. And
so you're just kind of lost in the system.
Just lost in the system, yeah. And ultimately, it was like, at first you're ready to charge and ready to go. You want to go do your thing. I'm good. And then I actually had to go. I was the one calling them, saying, "Hey, what are you guys doing with me?" And like, "Oh, we don't need this." Kind of like poop, like kind of like dismissing me a little bit.
Yeah.
And then so I said, "Okay, well, you know what? I can't just sit around all day." So I was working out, and I went to like college classes. I paid for some college classes just to take some regular college courses. Volunteered at the Boys and Girls Club in Camden, just to somewhere. I needed to be part of something.
Yeah.
I needed to do something. And that's kind of where some of my depression and some of my, I guess, like PTSD depression kind of thing was kind of coming into play, because part of my brain injury also was emotional, as far as like I had a short tolerance. Like I had a quick temper with people sometimes. Like I would go from 0 to 60. Like if you interrupted what I was saying, I just got mad. I snapped at you real quick, and I got fired.
All right, lesson learned. I'm not going to
Or
interrupt you to say the podcast.
Not anymore. Right. This is 21 years ago. But
were you like that before?
No.
Okay.
No, I think that's the thing. I think it took some getting used to for my family, my friends, to kind of like see like, okay, this is your personality. Because one of the things they told my family too was, when I was unconscious, they said, okay, listen, when he wakes up, he's not going to be the same person that you know. He might be more aggressive and more. And they said they were afraid of me because I was 220 pounds and I was like, pretty strong. I was benching like 3 something. And they was like, okay, well, he's going to be kind of scary when he wakes up. And,
like an angry linebacker.
Like freaking the Incredible Hulk here. But in actuality, they say I was flirting with some of the nurses and stuff too, so I was kind of like a lover boy.
Except for the terrorist.
Except for the terrorist, yeah. Except for the terrorist who was trying to kill us, But I did have that little quick snap thing, but then I would go back to regular. So that was one part of it, and then just also, I guess, me just kind of figure out where I belonged and trying to find my spot. So.
Not just in the Army, but just
in life,
like emotionally. And that was sort of what intrigued me when you and I talked before. And I said, man, I really want to tell this story on the podcast, because I think, not to fast forward there, but to kind of summarize, if I can, the next 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, right? Next 2 years, you spent sort of in states of limbo where you're trying to establish your identity and like, hey, Army, do you want me? Am I part of this? Am I damaged goods? Because I don't feel like I'm damaged goods. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I remember you conveying some of those thoughts to me. I wonder if you can elaborate on those.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It was about 2.5 years. It was going back and forth. I would go. Walter Reed would call me back. They would do like MRIs and they'd do like a full test. I'll be there for about a week, and then they send me back home and say, we'll call you when we're with our results. And I'd be radio silence for weeks or months. And then I was like, okay, what's going on? Oh, sorry, sir. We don't have your stuff's not up to date, whatever. It was like back and forth for the longest time. And then actually it was kind of funny. So what I would do also, I was kind of like, I met this girl who ends up being my wife now. So I met her and I drove out there to go see her, had a great weekend. And then that Monday, that's when Walter Reed calls me back and said, hey, listen, we need you to come back. I'm like, oh, great, I just met this girl. Now, after 2.5 years, you're going to assault my game like that. You mess my, come on, man, just Blue Falcon over here. And so then it's like, okay, what are you going to do now? And then it ended up being a blessing in disguise, because when I got stationed at Walter Reed as an XO, I was an XO Bravo Company at Walter Reed.
Oh, you're full move on down there.
I'm full move on.
Like, you're up in Jersey up for this point.
I'm in Jersey.
For 2 years plus.
Yep. Yeah. I'm doing jug handles. I'm doing the whole thing. I'm not paying for my gas, the whole thing in Jersey. All the stereotypes, down the shore, whatever you want to say. And I'm down in DC now. and but it actually cut my commute in half. So because she was in Western PA, so I got to see her. But I was the XO of Walter Reed, and I saw firsthand a lot of the soldiers coming back and things like that. But again, for those 2 years, I was like, what am I gonna do? Where do I belong? Who am I? And so that was good to be back there to be a part of something. But then when I get, medical discharge, they say, okay, listen, they gave me 10% disability. And they said, okay, give me a little bit of money. They said, okay, well, thanks for your service. Adios.
So were you looking to get out, or the Army came to you and said, hey, sorry, it's not going to work?
It was the Army's decision, but I think by that time I kind of knew. I mean, after about 2.5, I didn't go to OBC.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be a tanker. I think it was 19 Alpha, and they said I haven't seen a tank in up to 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was working at Walter Reed, but I didn't have any medical training or anything like that.
So the writing's on the wall that
Hey, listen, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
They're not going to send me. And then, which, okay, fine. It was like an amicable breakup, but it's still okay. Now what? Now what? Kind of thing. And that was the tough part too, was trying to figure out, okay, who am I and what's going on? Because, I mean, give me the 30,000 foot view. I've worked jobs and then, I've done well, but then I'll get laid off because of the economy or because of this and that, or whatever. And every time I got laid off, it was kind of like, well, damn, what am I? Where do I belong? Kind of thing. Meanwhile, I see
this is post-Navy career, or post-Army career.
Yeah, post-Army career. So I got discharged, and it's like, okay, well, I see my friends and everybody, just people who are just as high speed as or just as good as at West Point, where they're doing they're doing great things, and like not to knock them, of course, but it's like, where's my shot? Where do I belong in this? And it was kind of like, unfortunately, they say the whole social media stuff like that too. Like they show you only the good things on social media, which but
that's the question, right? Are you happy? Or are you Facebook happy? Right?
Yeah, exactly. Are you happy or Facebook happy? Exactly, but it kind of reminded me like, oh, I'm not where I thought I should be, And every time that I got laid off or something like that, I had to start over again. And it was like, okay, I'm taking 2 steps forward and then like 3 steps back kind of thing. And then it was like, ultimately it was just like, that's what kind of fed into that perpetual depression, and everything kind of led back to June 1st, 2002. Like if I didn't get in that car accident, what would I have been?
Yeah.
Would I have been still, an officer in the Army doing great things? Would I be a colonel now, or would I be a lieutenant colonel, whatever? Or would I be, doing great things at a job, somewhere, some civilian world, like being a director or something like that?
That's hard to reconcile, right?
It is.
With the what could I have been? Why me? And I think that was part of what you and I talked about a little bit before, is the whole, like, why did this have to happen to me? And then at some point, I think you had said, like, you just stop asking and just say, you know what, screw it. It did happen. I can't worry about it. And that's what was the other part of your story that I really was drawn to, was that embedded in everything that you had talked to me about before was just stories of resilience, about just like picking myself up by the bootstraps and being like, I can't wonder why June 1st happened. I can only accept that it did, and then bounce back. Especially when all of your hopes and dreams and your identity were baked into this one thing that life, that circumstance just took away.
Yeah, I think that's what I think happens with a lot of veterans. Especially the ones that come straight from 18 years old. Like this is the first, like I did with West Point. I came straight from high school to West Point. So my whole adult career, my whole adult life was military. Yeah. And that's what I planned on doing for however long, and then that was me. And then that was not me, like just like that.
Yeah. That was I didn't have a plan B. That was plan A. And that was what I was going to be.
Exactly. And it's that kind of depression a little bit. It gets kind of like, you get down a bit, because like, who am I really? And then on top of that, it's when it comes to a brain injury in particular, I think unlike a lot of other injuries, is your brain, your way of thinking is you, like that's your identity. And to me, there was one of the things too, like I used to really kind of hate, or have to kind of contend with, was I would talk to some people, and to me it sounds like I sound fine. I'm a great orator. I'm just like I'm like 7 years ago. I'm saying some hot stuff right
eloquent,
now. I'm eloquent. I'm
one of the great orators of our time.
Exactly. Give me a podium. I'm about to. But somebody else is like blah blah blah. And I would see my mom or my grandmother or my sister look at me kind of like, what are you saying? And I'm like, what are you talking about? This is some good stuff I'm giving you right here. This is some grade A stuff. What are you talking about? But it's coming out though, because they would have videos of me, and I'll be like, dang, that's how I really sounded. In my mind, I'm sounding good. But to them, because that's how your mind works. Your mind is who you are. And so I was like, wow, I really am messed up. I'm not I really am. And so I have to find a new way to do things now. Like
How many years later was this?
this was like pretty soon after the speaking part was pretty soon afterwards, for about maybe a few months or about a year afterwards. But I think my recovery happened a little faster than normal. I think because I was young, luckily. Happened when I was young, so brain could actually I had time to recalibrate. And then I also didn't just sit down and just kind of just like wallow. I was depressed and I hated things and I was angry, but I was like, I'm going to do something. I'm going to prove myself that I'm good still. And I started taking getting college courses. I was watching Jeopardy. I was taking crossword puzzles, things. I was doing things to kind of exercise my brain, because your brain is like a muscle. If you don't use it, then it gets atrophied or whatever. So I was doing that. So I think that kind of helped to recalibrate my brain. And the way I was told years later, when I started going back to the VA, talking to neurologists, they were taking another CAT scan. They said, yeah, you still have scarring on your brain here. And they say the way they described it to me was your brain usually works like your neurons go from A to B the most efficient way when you're born. Then when you get a car accident, when you get an accident or you get some damage to it, it cuts that route. So the neurons have to find an alternate route, kind of like I-95. With what's going on with I-95 now, they have to go by. It's
a good analogy.
Yeah, now you have to go. It's going to be traffic. It's going to take you a little longer, but you're going to get there. But it's going to take a little longer. It's not as optimal, and that's kind of how I am now. So my memory isn't quite as fast, or my thoughts aren't quite as quickly as they were when I was a cadet or before. When I was. Yeah. But 20-something years later, I had to find ways to cope or find ways to kind of alter or kind of deal with it. So
what do I know you've told this story 1,000 times, you've talked to groups. What do you tell them about resilience for people who are dealing with depression or just that loss of identity or loss of goals, right? When people talk about I've heard psychologists before saying that we don't use the word mourn often enough when you talk about a loss of an opportunity. We use that with death and things like that, but if you have a goal or a dream in mind and that's taken away from you, you have to go through the stages of grief to mourn the loss of that goal. Like, hey, you're not going to make it in Major League Baseball, and you have to mourn the loss of that goal when you get cut or something, or when you age out. And I wonder if you have some lessons, and I think you've mentioned that before.
Well, with me in particular, again, I think it's a case-by-case thing, but I think with me in particular, I had to, and it's really been probably within the last couple of years, is I had to kind of just say, okay, listen, this is who I am now. The Jonathan the 22-year-old Jonathan from 2002 is no longer. I hate talking to myself in third person. I feel like I'm pretentious,
especially when you're talking to another Jonathan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I'll just assume you're talking about me.
Yeah, exactly. But but yeah, I'm not
Jonathan. You need to get out. Okay, all right.
I'm not the same person. Yeah, exactly. I'm not the same person I was before. So you have to accept that first and foremost, I think. And then once you do that, then it's like, okay, what can I do now? Honestly, you have to take self-accountability. Say, what can I do now, honestly, to fix it or to do the best I can to find a resolution. So, I found those alternate routes or ways of thinking. I write a lot of notes down on my phones, or or I have certain mnemonics that I have, where I have to kind of have things kind of in order to be able to locate things in my house. Like I put them exactly in the same spot. Now, part of that is probably military, where it's everything belongs where it needs to belong. But for me, it helps also for me to be able to kind of say, okay, I know where this is now, and I know where, so little things like that, little adjustments. And I think one of the things, I think a lot of us veterans, we're very proud people, especially, the ones that are super alpha kind of things like that. Be open and talk to people. And let them know that this is what it is. This is what's tough, because I think nobody knows what's going on in your head other than you. And the only way they'll know that is you let them know about it. So my friends, I think too, I come across a lot of times when people meet me, they say, I would never have known you had such a horrible accident and you were so messed up. But which is good, which I'm proud of, that I was able to recover that quickly. But there are still things underneath the surface, especially with brain injuries. Usually, if you were an amputee or something like that, you can see it.
Yeah,
it's right there in your head, in your face. But whereas when it comes to brain injuries, PTSD, things like that, they can't see it unless you let them know. And
interesting. And I think to your point, and that's something I think veterans and other people outside of veterans, but veterans in particular, I was listening to a podcast where they talking about. Brandon Brooks from the Eagles was one of the first NFL players to come out and truly openly talk about mental health as a challenge and anxiety. And I think so it's outside of veterans, the veteran community as well, but after 20 plus years of war, I think veterans are certainly leading the charge on not only dealing with it, but also or suffering from TBIs and mental health issues, but also leading the charge on saying, hey, I want to shed that stigma that I'm an alpha, I'm too tough to talk about it. When you mention getting out there and sharing it, you suffered your accident in 2002, so we're 20 plus years into it. Have you seen a pretty good transition amongst the community where folks are doing it? And do you know like instances where you yourself have had an impact in saying, hey man, like listen, like, you don't need to hide it. Like these are invisible wounds and we need to just share it.
I've seen it being more open a little bit. Not so much that we're training our own stories too much, but I think a lot of people are going more to the VA. Like when I go to the VA hospital now, I'm seeing I think more people going to like the mental health portion, nice. Which is good. I think because it's getting more accepted. Not just in the military thing, but in civilian world. Period. I mean, and PTSD is not just a military specific disorder. I mean, any kind of traumatic injury is. It goes with all kinds of things, like car accidents or whatever. So I'm seeing more of that too. And then again, I think people are starting to be okay with saying this is what I have, and it's okay. It's becoming more like an accepted. It's getting more accepted in this demographic, especially with the military, I believe. And with me in particular, nobody really particularly came to me and said, "Hey, John, you did this. Because of you, I'm doing this." But I think some of the talks that I've given, I'm part of the Travis Manning Foundation. I do talks to high schools. And I think
through Travis Manning.
Yeah, Travis Manning Foundation. Yep. So I've done talks to high schools, and I think some kids, when I go to my part in particular, is the perseverance part. Yeah. They say, okay, wow, I see more kids like nodding their head and so like too, like their wheels are turning. No, they're not going to come out and say, John, that's me. They're kind of like they still want to be quiet amongst their peers, but you can kind of tell. So I clicked something with them, whether with them or with somebody they know. And I think that's all I need. I don't need somebody say, hey, give me my roses or anything like that. Just as long as it works for you, as long as what I say works for you or for somebody else, then that's fine.
That's part of why we do it, right? It's for the legacy we leave behind. I know you had an impact on somebody else.
Exactly.
Part of why we brought you into Greencastle today is not only to share your story here, but you're going to talk to our team in just a little bit. I know you talked about being in and out of jobs and finally landing on your feet or finding a career and some stability in a career that works for you. You are now a financial advisor, but with a keen background, and it's a little bit of a shift from what we first talked about with the podcast. But I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up because there's so much value, especially with our audience and some of the things that they tune in for. Is you have some really keen insights, not just on personal wealth management and advice in the financial management realm, but specifically in veterans and military benefits and things that veterans just are missing. And it's unfortunately it's not the DoD has not caught up with where we need to be on educating young soldiers and airmen and so on about being smart with their money. Yeah. What are some of those things that jump out at you that?
Well, one of the things too, for me, actually going through it myself is knowing what benefits are available. When you go into law, you can go to va.gov or like that, and there's a whole mess of stuff, and they kind of just give you like the high 30,000 foot view stuff. Like, we have this, we have that, and it can be so inundative that it's almost like analysis paralysis. Like you get so full of stuff. It's like, okay, what do I do? Okay, I'm not gonna do anything. Never mind, just forget it. Or a lot of times, I think a lot of times veterans, kind of like we were talking about before, is sometimes we're so proud, or we're like saying, I don't need that. I don't want the handouts or things like that. And I'm going to go a little more into this in particular with the presentation, or just, I don't want to take from somebody else, or whatever. Just a lot of different views on benefits. But I want to tell veterans too, like, this you're entitled to this. Like, this is something when you sign that contract. So when Uncle Sam said, hey, get up and go here, move here, take you and your family and move here, or do this, or go in this firefight, or they're shooting here, you signed the contract to do that, right? Well, during that contract, they also said, okay, if you do this, we'll provide this for you. Yeah. That was the trade-off. And I think a lot of times, a lot of veterans don't see that part. They say, okay, well, I did my duty, I'm done. But they don't see this rest of the part that they're used to, that they're entitled to, whether it be
Do you think the word entitlement is that a turnoff, that veterans are too proud?
possibly.
Yeah,
I think it is.
Benefit might be
Yeah,
like I like
benefit.
the way you phrase it. It's a trade-off. Like
Yeah.
you get this because you achieved your part of the deal.
Exactly.
Now you get the reward on that
Yeah.
backside. I'm
Yeah.
sorry I cut you off, but
No, that's
I don't want you to yell at me.
No, no, that's exactly it. It's I guess and the word entitlement has a bad stigma. I mean, obviously, unfortunately, but it's true entitlement though, or you can say benefits. We'll go with benefits first, but it's the benefit. It's that side of the contract that you signed that they owe you. All right. And I'm not saying overdo it or lie and cheat or try to snake your way into getting a benefit that you don't think you deserve.
Yeah, sure.
But at the same time, get what you do deserve. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't really go into, especially with veterans, is and then also, quite frankly, it's a very inefficient system. It's very long backlog. It's a whole long process. And sometimes people don't have the time or energy to really deal with it. But if you do just stick with it, there's usually something at the end of the tunnel kind of thing. So I do urge a lot of veterans to at least look into the VA. And that little thing, that little naggy knee injury that you've had for a long time that you think, well, I'll get over it. If it happened during your time as in military, then report it. Because possibly it could turn into something bigger maybe later on down the road, and then you'd be like, oh crap, how can I handle this when this is something that the VA could have helped handle for you, medically or whatever. So I do think it is something that we need to kind of look more into. Yeah.
Where do you see the biggest challenges besides just being overwhelmed? And is there something that veterans can do better is it reaching out to one of the VA advocacy groups like the DAV, or there's probably hundreds out there? Where do you see opportunities for them to do some better self-care and better self-advocacy?
Well, yeah, I would say obviously maybe reach out to some of these. There are some nonprofits that again, like I said, the DAV you mentioned was good. There's a couple other places that you could find that help out veterans or that advocate for veterans. Also, make your voices heard. I mean, sometimes we go out there and vote. I think sometimes people in Washington. I think there's luckily one of my friends from West Point. I think he's down in Texas. I think he's a congressman in Texas. He's got into Congress. He was a friend of mine from West Point, and it's good to see him. Wesley Hunt. He's advocating for veterans there, and he's taking it from the Capitol. It's we gotta make our voices heard and kind of speak up for ourselves a little bit, because one thing I think that I hope that doesn't happen in this country is now that the Gulf War is over, they kind of say, okay, it's done, and the whole big patriotic "we love our veterans" thing hopefully doesn't start to die down. I hope it doesn't do that, because there are people who live with that and unfortunately, I think that was something that happened with our Vietnam vets. A lot of Vietnam vets, they didn't have that. They came back with the fanfare that a lot of people from Iraq came back, or Afghanistan came back with. So they didn't get that. So they didn't get it till the tail end. But I think it's something that this is a demographic, this is a part of our population that they did their part, and I think hopefully they stay recognized and they stay keeping the benefits and things that they're that are owed to them. So.
What's next for Jonathan Childs?
Well, I mean, hopefully, I've been in this role for quite a while. I think I like it. I'm gonna stick around for a while. It's been about 10 years, so I'm working kind of actually for myself, which is good. I get what I put in, which is about the only thing I ask for.
So if you're a veteran and you're looking to maybe touch base with somebody you've never talked to, a personal financial advisor. Maybe you just don't even know how to invest or where to start. Maybe where can folks find you on the interweb?
Well, I work for Paragon Wealth Management, so you can go www.paragon-wealth.com, and that's the website that we have for our firm. I work with Charlie McNamara and Ricardo Ferreira, who's also a veteran as well. He's a Navy vet, and Phil Rosenau. That we all just kind of work together. We're a big team. We try to do things what's best for the client. We're not trying to push any kind of products or anything like that. We're fiduciaries, so we by law or have to look out for our clients. And then me in particular with the veterans. I mean, again, I could try to point you to the VA benefits that you're entitled to, and I could also help you work those benefits into your civilian life and try to make it all into one big happy meal, one financial meal for you. So that's my job, and that's what I hope to do until I retire.
Awesome.
So,
John, thanks very much for joining us, man. Thanks for
Appreciate it.
sharing
Thank
your
you,
story.
Jonathan. My pleasure.